Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Joy Asonye Live this beautiful evening here on KAFTAN Television. As usual, we discuss political trends across the country, and today we'll be discussing the primaries ahead of the 11th November elections in Kogi State. Political parties in the state are hurrying to conduct their primaries, and the APC has had some stories around the conduct of their primaries, especially after a court cancelled the congresses that was conducted, and now they were forced to do a direct go the direct primaries way. And are they ready for direct primaries, and have they considered everything? Is it too short notice for party members to participate in that? And we've also heard that certain aspirants, in the context, also had to let go or set aside, as it's often said in the Nigerian terms, set aside their ambition for others. What's going on in that state? Well, we'll be discussing all of this with Aliyu Audu. He's the convener, APC Rebirth Group, and he'll be joining us via Skype all the way from Kogi State at the moment. But before we go to that interview, we'd also have another one after that, speaking about the 10th Assembly leadership and the selection dynamics. There's so much on this show this beautiful day, so stay with us. After this short break, we'll just delve into the interviews proper. Welcome back from that break. Like I said earlier, we'll take the conversation to Kogi State, where we're having primaries. I will be talking about the emerging issues. And joining us right now to discuss all of that is Aliyu Audu, the convener, APC Rebirth Group. Hello, Aliyu. How is Kogi State today? Can you hear me? Okay, I think we're having technical issues there. I can't really hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, much better. That's much better. Okay, so what's the ambience like? What's the pulse of the people? I mean, direct primaries, that's not the first decision political parties in Nigeria seem to be toying, but the APC is forced to do that. First of all, in your words, what would you say the APC members, how they're feeling right now?
Like I said, I'm in Abuja, right? But
okay.
Yeah, the feelers from Kogi State isn't
Please go ahead.
Technical issues.
Okay, can you hear me, Audu? Okay, I think we're having technical issues at the moment. Well, it's time to introduce the guest that's in the studio waiting. We will just take the conversation to the 10th Assembly leadership selection dynamics, and later on, if we can get that connection right, we will come back to that interview. But in the meantime, we have Barrister Mike Adinye in the studio. He's a regular here on Joy Asonye Live. He's a legal practitioner and a political analyst. The race for who becomes Senate President and Speaker House of Representatives in the 10th Assembly is gathering momentum as aspirants are intensifying their campaigns and lobbying and consulting politicians and stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, to achieve this ambition. However, Nigerians are waiting. What would they consider? What would political parties in the House consider? Would they toe the line that some are asking them to go to, talking about a geographical zoning to a certain geopolitical zone, or they will go the religious way? Well, we'll be discussing all of this, and we have Adinye right here. Adinye, it's so good to have you join us.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine.
Right. Now, Adinye, let's just go straight. I mean, where do you think we'll go with this? And this 10th Assembly, are you getting feelers that they are different? We thought that with the composition of the House, having about 8 political parties, we would see something different. But with the indices, would you say there's anything different so far?
Well, unfortunately, the 10th Assembly appears to be towing the path of the Ninth Assembly. There's nothing different. Because when we have people who probably have lost the credibility reposed on them, as a result of which they're looking for windows to rely on, looking for support, looking for godfathers, contrary to the tenets of the National Assembly. It shows that we're having an assemblage of people who do not know what they're supposed to do as legislators. Obviously, they're taking the very wrong path. That's not the way to go.
I should expect you're implying the fact that they seem to be leaning towards what the president's body language is.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Even though the president has said severally, and if you ask me about his body language, he has not shown that need to influence or interfere on who becomes on the leadership of the National Assembly, the 10th National Assembly.
Yeah, I don't know why the legislators or elected representatives are running after the president. I hear that some of them have gone as far as Paris. They've gone, to consult, to consolidate on their campaigns to become principal officers of the 10th Assembly, which ordinarily should not be so. We saw what happened in the 9th Assembly and how they ended. They became like what my friend and colleague would say, the hallelujah boys of the president, because whatever the president decided was seen to be right, and that is not what the elected representatives are supposed to be doing. In a situation where you now look up to the president, because you want to take positions to become principal officers of the National Assembly, will not augur well for us as a people. You would rather be representing yourself and your immediate family rather than representing those who are supposedly, or whom we feel have sent you or elected you to represent them at the National Assembly. It's a very wrong path they're towing, and I think it's not late. They have to renege from that and do the right thing.
Well, I do not have evidence to what you just said right now as to their leanings towards the president, running towards the president. That's still speculative, but hypothetically speaking, let's say that's in fact the situation. Would you say the president indeed has that influence, the president-elect rather, has the influence on the House at the moment to interfere enough to get to determine who emerges leaders?
Well, the president has a say because the way the country is being run right now, it appears they're giving so much responsibility or placing so much responsibilities on the head of the president. I want you to understand one thing, that a good workman does not need an advert.
That makes me giggle because I saw advertorials, in the magazine.
I've seen so many participants, how do you call them, contestants or aspirants, jostling for position. Some of them have even gone as far as inviting press men, or if they've granted press interview to say, I am most qualified, I'm the longest serving senator, I've been there right from the days of Abraham, and therefore I'm most qualified. And others have said, we've not had it, it is better you zone it to the southeast, and so others are saying, no, you can zone it to the northwest. That is not what we need. The election of principal members of the National Assembly rests squarely on members of the National Assembly, and not on the president. And that is the only time we can have proper separation of powers. And the legislature, truly independent.
Yes.
You cannot lean on the arms of the president and expect to be independent.
This is a president.
Whatever you do,
the president is,
whatever you do will be based on the whims and caprices of the president, because you now see your emergence as the president's handiwork.
The president-elect, or when he emerges president, who ultimately be the leader of the party. So there's also that influence, like you have accepted earlier, that he will influence where it is zoned. If the party is going to consider zoning in the 10th Assembly, you can understand why it might be a very important journey to go all the way to Paris, as it is alleged that some candidates, some aspirants within the House are already traveling that far. However, what would you rather the president do at the moment? So far, the president-elect, I apologize, so far he has not shown that he is tending that way, but would you ask him to shut his doors to these House members, these senators-elect and House of Representatives-elect who are thronging his doorsteps?
Well, I see that as a major distraction. Please, you made reference to the fact that once the president is inaugurated, he becomes the head or leader of the party. But upon assumption of office, he becomes the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and not the president of APC.
The political parties' dealings right now would determine whether they win if they do not get their act right.
Where they are getting it wrong is the fact that in the 9th Assembly, we had two major political parties that dominated the National Assembly. Right now, we have other political parties.
About 8 of them.
Yes, that can come together and counter the directives or decisions of the APC that is said to be the ruling party. So it's a different scenario entirely. But the people, especially those who are returning to the Senate, are not the new senators or senators-elect, the ones who are jostling for this position, because are probably still thinking that the 10th Assembly is similar or similitude of the 9th Assembly, without recourse to the fact that the 10th Assembly has a conglomeration of other political parties and not just what was or what used to be or what has always been in the 9th Assembly.
A lot of those that made it to the 10th Assembly are new timers or greenhorns or whatever works for you. However, do you think it would influence how the emergence of the leadership of both houses? I'm asking because if the APC plays its game right, we would see them have that upper hand. But also, if the opposition come together, they have a chance here. Do you think the opposition will be swayed towards the ruling party?
Well, it depends. This is Nigeria. Anything can happen. You know, ahead of the dollar reign, that is the only way,
as the EFCC and ICPC has alleged,
they can get capture their interest or attention. If they can buy them over, so be it. Because this is Nigeria, you never can tell what will happen. You know, they can come out there at the level of their political parties and say, no, we're not interested, we're not doing this. But behind, they will go and collect dollars, go and collect money. Probably they have not seen the kind of money that they will be getting. You know, the lobbyists will present to them, and when such opportunity arises, I don't see them being capable to reject the offer.
But your fear is the dollarization of the lobbying
in the system, and that is why we need the security agencies to come in and take their rightful place and do the right thing, so that it will curtail some of these excesses.
I mean, we saw the anti-graft agencies, the ICPC, the EFCC come out to say we do know that this is going on, and we would look into it.
One thing is to back, another thing is to bite.
Right. So at this point, I'm quite surprised, especially because, I mean, when in the build-up of the elections, we're advocating for Nigerians not to shun voter inducement, and we did not know that we would see this in this level, where those who held our hands while we're advocating for Nigerians to shun voter inducement are now culpable. They are now complicit in the same menace, this horrible trend we are seeing in our political process.
Take note that the same thing happened during the elections or prior to the elections. We had some of these warnings, we had some of these directives from the anti-graft agencies. But what happened at the end of the day? We saw people buying a voter's card, we saw people trading their votes, we saw people being induced with all material things, and then nothing happened. Nobody has been arrested, nobody has been charged to court. I think it's time now for us to introduce these tribunals that will take care of election matters, because I think section 22 or thereabout of the Electoral Act talks about voters inducement or vote buying, and I bet up till now we've not seen anybody that's being arrested, even when it's obvious that some of these politicians go about buying votes unhindered. So they have come out to say what they can say. Another thing is to put what they have said to practice, so that the politicians will take proper dressing. As it is right now, I don't hold that strongly, because I don't see anything happening until we see it happening.
Right. I mean, it would be interesting to see a member-elect being arrested.
Yes,
exactly.
for vote buying.
For vote buying, it would be interesting.
Inducement. Let's start from there. If you start from the top, every other person will take proper dressing.
Now, what kind of lobbying would you like to see in the 10th Assembly that would not, in your words, be morally, or rather, what kind of lobbying would be morally upright, one that reflects the democratic process in Nigeria?
A good workman does not need any address. They know themselves. Some of these lobbyists are people who are old-timers in the National Assembly. They're not new. So if you know that this person is capable of doing a particular thing, it does not really need much lobbying. The only thing he needs to do is to ice the cake. They know themselves. And they know that, okay, this person can represent us well. Apart from the fact that he can represent us well, he can represent his people as a true ambassador. So they should go by that. You don't even need to waste your time if you know what you're capable of doing. That's the way I look at it. Those who have gone on air to say, I am this, I am that, are telling lies. I don't see them being capable of doing whatever they are promising Nigerians or promising their lawmakers. Some of them have even gone beyond the National Assembly. The election of principal members of the National Assembly rests squarely on the National Assembly and not individuals outside the National Assembly. So let them toe that part. And then at that point, we can have a robust National Assembly that would represent the true yearnings and interests of Nigerians, contrary to what is happening right now in the country.
Let's talk about the 9th Assembly, and then if you can agree with me that if there's anything that stands the 9th Assembly out is the synergy between the 9th Assembly and the executive, the presidency and all of that. Is that particularly a bad thing?
Yeah, it's very, very bad because I know that all the desires to get loan for the country were just passed even before they arrived. Before they were presented at the National Assembly, there was no serious objection like we had in the 7th and 8th Assembly.
Why do you think that is?
The demand for loans were simply passed without proper questioning of what the loans were meant for.
Yeah, you don't believe
one of
that,
the senators said,
right,
that his emergence, the Deputy Senate President in particular, I'm quoting him right, had said that his emergence as a Deputy Senate President in the 9th Assembly rested squarely on the President. That if he had not received the President's endorsement, that he wouldn't have been the Deputy Senate President. And on no account will he oppose the President.
On no account?
He said so. So how do you check the excesses of the executive when you have simply cheapened yourself, you've simply given yourself to the whims and caprices of the executive?
Okay, it's not because they share the same political ideology.
Not that. Some were already engaged in servitude and slavery, and were highly and entirely subservient to the executive.
Okay, if you have to advise this composition of the 10th Assembly so that we don't see what Nigerians have over the years referred to as the rubber stamp assembly, what would be your advice, knowing fully well the powers that is rested on the executives and the power play that often comes on when we have opposition, remembering also what happened in 2015. So if you have to marry all of this, what would be your advice to this composition of 10th Assembly?
There's nothing wrong in having an interface between, critical members of any political party, in conjunction with the president. But a situation where, instead of the executive lobbying the National Assembly so that they can work together peacefully and harmoniously, but where you have individuals running after the executive because they want to occupy prominent positions or want to become principal members of the National Assembly, that in itself is a criteria for disqualification. Whoever is engaged in such advertorial should be disqualified ab initio. That's the way I look at it.
Right.
Because I don't see anything good coming out of such persons. They will become like what my friend and brother will always say, the hallelujah boys of the executive.
Let's go to the geopolitical components to this. I mean, a lot of Nigerians are looking out for who emerges, where the person comes from. Unfortunately, this conversation was not rife until the emergence of the president and the president-elect and his deputy, where, okay, we have the president-elect coming from the southwest, we have his deputy from the northeast, and we also have them both having the same faith ticket that has also elicited a lot of reactions by Nigerians. So if you have to marry that, do you see a 10th assembly that would consider the religious, consider religion and consider the ethnic sentiment as well?
Yes, I see it that way, because the choice of a Muslim to deputize the president generated a lot of controversy, anxiety and tension. You know, Nigeria is a very fragile country due to our heterogeneous nature. And if we have a Senate president who is equally, you know, of the same faith or same belief with both the president and the vice president, it will further degenerate into a crisis situation.
Right.
I see a situation where the Senate president should be of a different faith. Even if it's not a believer, it should be a different faith from the president and the vice president, to balance
even if, what do you mean by even if it's not a believers?
No, what I mean is that it may not necessarily be a Christian, but that person not be a Muslim. You know, apart from Christianity and Islam,
there's the traditional Nigerian,
which most times we neglect, but they exist. It's not everybody that is a Christian or is a Muslim. We have persons who don't even go to church.
Don't you think if we represent, if this person, this traditional practitioner comes up to become Senate president, the Christians will say we are being marginalized?
I mean, in a situation where we do not have a Christian that is eminently qualified,
is there such a thing?
Let the person not be a Muslim.
But is there such a thing as a Christian that is not eminently qualified?
Based on the advertorials we're getting so far, if somebody says, okay, this person is not a Christian, is not a Muslim, or is not seen to be a Christian. Not every Christian is a Christian, take note. Some can be Christians because of where they can be tagged or can have that toga, Christian, not necessarily because they're Christians, but by virtue of where they come from, or probably because of the names they bear. Remember that these names were given to them as children when they had no say. So that could just give a different, classification, wherein the person is tagged a Christian or not a Christian. Some persons attribute Christianity to the South, even though we have Christians even in the Middle Belt. Right. We have Christians in the Northwest.
And Muslims as well, in the South.
Yes, we have Muslims in the South too. So let that Muslim thing not take the center space in selecting the speaker or the Senate president.
Should it not matter? Should the leadership, the 10th Assembly, not see that as a very good reason and go ahead to elect a Muslim in the leadership of the Speaker or House of Representatives or Senate?
I don't see that
But should that happen?
No, I don't even see it happening because
we're also seeing, however, we are seeing aspirants. We are seeing aspirants
who are Muslims as well. They are equally qualified.
Exactly.
But I don't see them having an upper hand at the end of the day.
Should they have an upper hand?
Well, I don't see it happening. I don't even believe it will happen. So there's no point even thinking.
I would have really loved you to take your thoughts there, because I want to see.
You have the president who is a Muslim. You know, we have a vice president who is a Muslim. We have a Senate president who is a Muslim. That would not take care of the secular nature of this country.
But we are now going, according to the president-elect, is more focused on national competence and not national unity, like a lot of people have asked him to the way they want him to toe. I mean,
okay. If you look at growing up, not necessarily growing up in the course of his advancement in politics, when he was the governor of Lagos State, the president-elect did not look at brotherhood or where you come from. What he was pursuing at that time was complete meritocracy, as against clientelism, prebendalism, or godfatherism, or nepotism, or ethnicity. He never took that part. And that is why it was easy for him to mentor some persons who are occupying major positions in the country today. He did not look at that. What he wanted was, what can you offer? What can you produce? What can you, bring to this at the table, to change what has always been? That is his philosophy as a person. That's the president-elect that I have always known. Right. That's the kind of person he represents. You understand what I'm saying? But where we told that the part of Muslim ticket, it will further dampen our willingness and desire to stay as one indivisible and indissoluble country. Even though
the other cabinets might be packed with Christians?
It doesn't really matter. The sensitivity of the National Assembly would rest squarely on the Senate President.
This is funny, especially because I remember also at prior to the general elections, to the primaries really, when the conversation of religion and ethnicity came, we were very, very loud and hammering on the fact that Nigeria should do away completely with this idea of religion and ethnicity. So when I hear political analysts such as yourself at this moment now bringing up the conversation around the religion and the need for equity, it beats my imagination.
Fair play and balance.
Well, you call it fair play, but would you say that if dividends of democracy cascades to everyone, we would still be thinking about who the religious leanings of the political actors?
I am not. This is not my own position. It's not what I believe in, or it's not my stand per se. But I have brought forth this based on my investigation, my research, the people I've interacted with. Take note that it's equally played out prior to the election, and that is why the president-elect then, as a candidate of the APC, took steps to have dealings with Christians. I remember at some point reference was made to the wife being a deacon in Deeper Life Church. So if it were not what we think or believe in, why did he take those steps? It means he was equally sensitive to the yearnings and demands of Nigerians. And I don't see him, even if he has a supporting candidate, I don't see him towing that part, knowing what he had passed through, the hurdles he passed through, where he met with some bishops, met with some Christians, critical stakeholders in Christendom, to see how he can ameliorate that thinking or that philosophy,
right,
and rather design their thought and feeling to having a country the world desire for,
right,
and not necessarily based on a religion.
And then let's go the ethnic way. Where do you think, to be fair, a Senate president especially should emerge from, bearing in mind that we have a southern president-elect?
Yes, that has automatically taken away the sympathy of having the Senate president down the south or the southeast. Take note that the president-elect is from the southwest, and then the vice president is from the northeast.
So in your opinion, to be fair,
we can have a Senate president from the northwest, and we can equally have a Senate president from either the south or the southeast to balance the geopolitical zones.
Okay, Mike Adinye, we'll go for a short break right now and see if we can make that connection with Audu Aliyu, who was supposed to join us via Skype to discuss the Kogi State APC primaries. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back from that break. We had tried to connect with Aliyu Audu, who would give us what's going on in Kogi State and the primaries that's supposed to be held tomorrow, but technical issues will not let us have that interview. But we still have Barrister Adinye here in the studio, and we've been discussing the 10th Assembly and the dynamics of leadership selection. But we've moved the conversation now. We're now talking about those in the House. We have 8 different political parties represented in the House. First of all, I would like to know what you think this will represent for the quality of representation we'll find. And then there's also the fear by smaller political parties who manage to clinch that seat, that they would decamp. Adinye, what's your thought on that?
Well, I've really not heard much about the willingness to decamp.
I mean, it's quite early, wouldn't you say?
It's too early to talk about decamping.
But do you envisage
You know, like the person who won the House of Reps election in Calabar, it's Calabar municipality in Calabar South. The person never, thought that he was going to win the election.
You know that how?
Yes, because he was not really celebrating. He just went to pick a form, but with the wind of change that came in with the
Labour
obedient
Party
movement.
Elupi.
Yes, and there's so many other persons who never thought it. Like I learned there's is it a shoe mender or a cyclist?
An Okada, yeah, the cyclist man from
it
Kaduna
goes
State.
to show that there's this reorientation in the minds of Nigerians. There's a tsunami, a political tsunami, like I would always say. People did not necessarily vote for their parties; they voted for
Elupi.
They voted for the people. They just wanted a change.
Right.
But if you think of the National Assembly and what will likely play out because of the other political parties
and the pressure that often
we're
comes
supposed to
it.
have a robust assembly, all things being equal. But that's what we expected. But I'm a bit confused and withdrawn, because of what played out,
The ninth
not necessarily the Ninth Assembly. The election did not, INEC did not give us what we expected, as Nigerians. And a lot of loopholes, a lot of problems associated with the inability of INEC to do what they were supposed to do. So there's this confusion, there's this apathy, there's this fear of the unknown. It will be difficult to say right now what will happen, when the 10th Assembly is inaugurated.
I want to understand why you're accommodating fears. Could this be because you do not know the people who eventually emerged? They were not properly interrogated, like the people you already had known over the years? Is that why you are not sure of the greenhorns?
No, not. My argument here is a sequel to the general belief, the displeasure expressed by Nigerians, people out there who are not happy with the outcome of the election. I thought what played out.
Right. I thought people were most unhappy with the presidential polls.
Basically the presidential polls. That came first before.
But we're talking about the 9th Assembly at the moment.
And the 10th Assembly.
The 10th Assembly, rather.
If the minority, would I call them minority political parties?
Minority political parties. You'll be right to call them that.
Yeah, so if they can put themselves together and come up with a robust check on the majority party, and then we're going to have a wonderful 10th Assembly.
Are they enough? Are they enough to actually achieve?
At this point, I cannot tell you for sure the exact number, the difference between the ruling party and other political parties. But I think if we have majority of them having the same belief or the same thinking pattern, they will give the ruling party a very hard nut to crack.
You were talking about the representative from Cross River State who just got who never
expected that he was going to win, but because he played along the part of the tsunami that came on board at that time, he emerged. I cannot imagine that somebody like that would defeat somebody who has been in the National Assembly for over 24 years. That's Honorable Asonye, who had been there for so many years, and they wanted to return. But a small man who just emerged from nowhere, he's no longer a small man anyway. He's an honorable member right now.
Exactly.
And they defeated the almighty Asonye simply because he came from the political tsunami at that time, which is the Labour Party.
But what's the danger in having people like this who, in your words, were not really ready for what they were buying tickets for and just emerged because of what you termed the tsunami? What's the danger when such people emerge, get to the house?
We may get the best from them. There are some persons who felt at some point that they had become the godfathers and owners of the National Assembly or deserved to have permanent seats there. It goes to show that if you're not active or if you don't do well, you'll be shown the way out. The same thing that has played out in the 10th Assembly, where most of the senators and House of Rep members are not returning, would likely play out. So a good representation will be a return ticket, after the 10th Assembly.
Now, one of your biggest anger rather with the Ninth Assembly is, as you say, they are rubber stamp, and especially in the issue of agreeing to all the loans that the application,
made by the executive.
Yes, the request made by the executive
without proper scrutiny.
Without, in your words,
yeah.
Or you think that
I think so, yeah.
there was no proper scrutiny.
There was no objection to it. I think the last one also. There's only one out of the numerous applications or presentations made by the president. We have been borrowing. We should be tired of borrowing.
We should be tired of borrowing.
The future of our children, even unborn children.
Yes. However, we saw in elections where we did not really. I mean, it was just a wave, like you said, a tsunami that culminated to the people who are there right now. Do Nigerian citizens know that they can recall their members if they feel like they are not being properly represented?
One thing is to have that at the back of their minds. Another thing is, to
see it through.
Yes, I doubt if that can happen, unless it is sponsored by a pseudo, by somebody behind the scene.
But we've also seen what you call the tsunami, and we've also seen the power of the office of the citizen. So
one thing is to be elected, or to be there at the National Assembly. Another thing is to be recalled. There is so much poverty in the land that people are willing to sell their common patrimony for whatever can be given to them, so that they can be sure of a meal to see the next day. Because of this poverty line or whatever is happening in the country now, it's difficult to say this is what will happen. But if INEC had done what they had promised Nigerians, that would have given a boost, and willingness of Nigerians to realize, especially the youths, to realize the fact that their destinies should be in their hands. But they were disappointed at the end of the day, and that's why we have a litany of cases going on in court right now.
Right. So this wave was just for elections, and they are disillusioned at the moment.
They're disillusioned, yes.
However, how can we reawaken
with the inability of INEC to do what they had promised?
Right.
We believe how can the promises made.
How can we invigorate, excite them again into political participation and engagement and governance?
Yes, I think that it's a very simple thing.
Right.
Whatever plays out from now henceforth will determine their willingness or ability to return, wherein they would be sure that their destinies, their future is guaranteed and protected. It's only at that time that they will be interested in.
So you're asking Nigerians to wait another 4 years, even if they are not getting proper representation?
I am not saying so. A lot of things will happen. Like I said, because of what played out, where persons who never expected, who never had the muscles, who never had the financial strength to withstand the political bigwigs, those who had the money emerging. So they want to do their best to retain that position after 4 years. By so doing, they will challenge the powers that be and make sure that the right thing is done. It's only at that point that they can guarantee their second coming or return to
Adinye, are you not speaking from both sides of your mouth when you say INEC did not do what they were supposed to, and yet we saw in elections where, like you said, people who could not have stood a chance ideally actually emerging. So what would you say? Did INEC pick and choose where to deliver a credible elections? Is that what you're implying?
I am not saying so. By virtue of the fact that INEC could not transmit result electronically. Let me tell you one thing. Let me balance my argument right now. Now, those who have emerged as elected representatives will put in their best. And in putting in their best, they will further convince the electorate of, the ability of good representation. It's only the activities, actions and inactions of the elected representatives now that will determine the willingness and ability of Nigerians to now have hope and confidence in the electoral umpire.
You said Nigerians are disillusioned because of the conduct of the election.
You
also admitted that some people who would ordinarily not have emerged because the will of the people was obvious, right?
Yes.
So why are they still disillusioned?
They are disillusioned because basically, it's what happened during the presidential election.
Oh,
transmission
okay. So
that's the main thing.
Are we pointing the ineptitude of INEC on just the presidential election?
That's where it played out.
Right.
But subsequently, remember that we did not completely rely on the beavers. You understand? It's negligible at the level at the next election, which is the governorship election. But the one that really played out, that had a focal point, was the presidential election.
If your representatives are representing you right, if your governors are doing what they should do, if your local government chairman are indeed having your interests, why is the presidency so important enough to get, like you said, Nigerians disillusioned or unhappy or so not willing to be participating in governance as much as they were supposed to?
Take note that we have only one president.
Of course.
And we have 36 governors.
Exactly.
There are different, perspectives. We have one person we all look up to.
I guess I'm just talking about
authority, and we have different governors. So if these persons do well, it will reflect in their willingness and ability to come back. It will ease the job for them. They would have done the campaigns even before the election. So they should go on there and go out there and do the right thing, and they sit back and get re-elected.
Okay, so what would be your final thoughts for the 10th Assembly leadership selection dynamics, if you have to lend your voice as to where they should look towards and ensure equity and fairness, as you had said earlier?
The senators or the members of the National Assembly should realize the fact that they are true ambassadors. They are ambassadors of their people. And the idea of running after the executive would not give them that sovereignty or true independence that will make them serve as a check on the executive. They should be focused. They should rely on what they can deliver, the deliverables to Nigerians, and not the deliverables to the executive.
Right.
It's only at that point that we can have a robust 10th Assembly.
Mike Adinye, legal practitioner, political analyst, thank you so much for being part of Joy
The pleasure
Asonye
is
Live.
mine. I'll always come in here each time I'm invited to be here.
Be rest assured we'll invite you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine.
Okay, so this is where we draw the curtains on Joy Asonye Live. I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead. We'll be back next week with more. Do have a fantastic weekend.